This is the third video in the AutoCAD ABCs where we will explore some more basic commands and actions and also take a look at the two kinds of units you will use to start a drawing from scratch. The first thing I'd like to remind everybody how to do is how to erase objects that you've drawn. There are two other ways to do that I'm going to show you that have to do with choosing multiple items with either a crossing window or a selecting window. Without being in any command, I can start a crossing window by clicking with my cursor on a point on the right hand side and then closing that rectangular shape. Notice too that it's green in color. And everything that window touches will select. You can see what is selected here has grips around it. Those are the items that I've selected. To unselect, press Escape. The other method is to use a selecting window. That window is created from left to right. Notice it's blue. Notice too that the only items that are highlighting are the items that I'm completely enclosing with this blue window. Anything that I don't completely enclose will not be selected. And then with that, I can either use the delete key or the erase command. E for erase, E and enter. If I've erased objects I did not intend to, there is a command to specifically restore those. The command is oops, OOPS. However, if I erase multiple objects with different commands, I'll start with this circle, I'll start with this rectangle next, and then I'll choose two of the lines of this shape here. Notice when I use the oops command, it will only restore the last objects that were erased. Undo, however, will work to restore and work your way back through many commands, all the way back to the beginning. And remember that command alias is U. U and enter each time will bring me back to where I had my objects. One other thing I wanted to show you about selecting items before we move on is how to unselect things that you've perhaps selected by mistake. If I select most of the or all of the objects on my screen and realize that I didn't want to erase or delete, say, this circle and this rectangle, if I hold my Shift key down and then click on those objects, I'm being careful not to click on a grip. That will do something else. Notice now I've unselected those items, so when I delete them, this time with my delete key, only the items that remain selected will be deleted. I'm going to go ahead now and delete all of the objects on my screen. I'm going to close the drawing, but before I do, I want you to notice that by default, when you start a new drawing, before you save it with a new name, AutoCAD gives you a drawing file name of Drawing 1. If I were to open another drawing, that would be Drawing 2, Drawing 3, and so on. I'm going to close that drawing. I can do that here on the tab. I can also do that here. This red X will close the entire program. I don't want to do that right now, but if I close this drawing file, I'm not going to save changes. There's nothing here to save, so I'm going to say no. I come back to a screen in AutoCAD that has no drawing open, which means that I don't currently have access to my command line. However, I have two ways to both start a new drawing or open a drawing if I choose. I want to start a new drawing, and the icon for that is right here. I could also go to the Applications menu. If I open that up, I'll see the option to choose a new drawing file from here. When I start that command, by default the Select Template dialog box appears. You'll find later on in the semester some handouts regarding creating your own templates, which you can choose to do. But for now in class, we're going to create all new drawing files from scratch. And we need to choose the correct units to get a drawing file started. To do that, we're going to come over to the right of the Open button to the down caret. You'll see I've got three options. I want to know if I'm choosing either an imperial drawing or a metric drawing. You'll see the assignments that you have will have dimensions and other information on there that will give you clues as to which type of unit you need to create that drawing in. Imperial would be for a drawing done in inches or feet or even miles. A drawing done in metric is often done in millimeters or meters or even kilometers. I'm going to start by opening with no template imperial. There's a command that you can use to check which kind of units your drawing has set up for itself. The command is measurement. You'll see I'm typing the entire word on the command line. That command does not have an alias. When I enter that on the command line, you'll see in the brackets I get a value. You'll see either a 0 or a 1 here. The 0 value means that this is in fact an imperial drawing. But if you forget what those values mean, remember you can always hit F1. That will open AutoCAD's online link to its help menu or help screen. It will give you an explanation of this measurement command and remind you the 0 value refers to an imperial drawing and all the different items in that drawing that will be affected. And then the value of 1 represents a metric drawing. I'm going to close the help window now and come back to my drawing. I'll hit escape to end that measurement command. The next thing I want to explore has to do with the space you have available in your drawing editor. What is the space that you're seeing and working within? How the information is represented will be affected by whether or not this is an imperial or a metric drawing. So to explore that, the command is limits, L-I-M-I-T-S. It's another command that does not have an alias or an abbreviation. When I press enter, the first prompt on my command line is to specify the lower left corner, which you'll see by default has a coordinate of x, which is 0, and y, which is also 0. We don't want that to change. We want the symbol that represents that Cartesian coordinate system to remain at those coordinates. So at this point in the command, I'll press enter. It's the upper right coordinates that if we need to change the limits we're working inside of, we want to change. Right now, my upper right corner is 12 units over in the x value and 9 units up in the y value. If I were drawing an object that was only a few inches in this case, even if I had multiple views, this might be enough room to work inside of. You may find, though, with objects that you're drawing that are much larger than this, that giving yourself enough room to work inside of with the limits command will help you control the space, and it will also affect how you're able to zoom in and out. So changing this to give yourself enough room for the views that you're drawing with a little bit additional will give you enough space to work inside of. For example, if I were to draw a circle and have that start coordinate be 8 units over, so 8x, and then 5 units up, so 5y, and then that diameter of that circle I'm going to make 12 inches. You'll notice right now I'm outside the limits of what I'm working inside of. And if I use my wheel to zoom, I can see it, but it doesn't quite fit. You can certainly place objects outside of those limits, but as I say, they do affect how you're able to zoom and what space you're working inside of. So changing the limits to fit this shape would make sense. Limits, The lower left will stay 0, 0. The upper right, let's see, if I started at 8, 5 and my radius is 6 inches, that means 8 plus 6, 14, plus a little extra room. I'm going to change my X unit to, oh, let's say 20. I'm also going to change my Y unit. I'm going to make that 15. Z for zoom, the zoom command, and all to include my new units, and you'll see my circle fits with a little room to spare on the sides. We haven't talked about layers yet. We're going to cover that in the next video. But one thing to keep in mind that is affected by whether or not you're drawing with imperial units or metric units are the way your line type patterns appear. So if I go into my layer properties and I take a look at the line type possibilities, you'll see that I'm dealing with one specific line type file, specific, as I say, for imperial drawings. The line types that we'll use in an imperial drawing are set up to appear correctly for those types of units. When we open a metric drawing next, I'll show you how this file is different and how those layers, the line types, are set up for those specific units. Okay, let's do that now. I'm going to close this drawing file, and I'm going to open a new file, or start a new file rather. This time I'm going to start a file that's with no template but metric units. You'll see the limits in the upper right for a metric drawing. You can assume that these values are in millimeters. This would work just fine for a metric object that was, say, 100 millimeters long by 50 millimeters high. Even with multiple views, I'd have enough space. But with this, I want to make sure, just like an imperial drawing, that I have enough space to work with. If I open up my layer manager, this time with the command, and the alias for that is LA, and I go and take a look at the line types that are available to me, you'll see that the file that's created for metric line types includes the letters ISO. This is the abbreviation for International Standards Organization. Whenever you see that, think metric. These line types will suit a metric drawing. Last, let's check to make sure that we are in a metric drawing. I want to use the command measurement. Notice the value that I have on the command line now is a 1 instead of a 0, and as you know, that now represents a metric drawing.